Hi, I'm Paul Charnier. I'm the editorial page editor of the Day newspaper, and I welcome our audience here at Kelly Middle Magnet School in Norwich, and our audience watching on theday.com to tonight's debate between the 19th Senate state candidates for the district that covers Columbia, Franklin, Hebron, Lebanon, Ledyard, Lisbon, Marlborough, Montville, Norwich, and Sprague. I didn't memorize that. The participants in tonight's debate are Senator Cathy Osten, the Democratic candidate, and Mark Lounsbury, the Republican candidate. I want to thank the Norwich Board of Education and Superintendent Abby Dolliver for hosting tonight's event here at Kelly. I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters of Southeast Connecticut, who are providing the timekeepers. The League also has, for those of here in the live audience, the League has a table set up outside with some important information on a couple of ballot questions that are on the ballot here in our November election. So you might take that opportunity. Also like to thank the technical crew at the Day who are providing this live feed on theday.com. I'm going to ask our audience, we're going to start with opening statements from our candidates. You know, if you want to applaud after you hear their opening statements, that's fine, but after that, I would ask you to be respectful once we go to questions, just to listen to the candidates and hold any further applause to the end. We'd like everyone to be respectful so we can get information from the candidates, and so can our audience on theday.com. Okay, by a flip of the coin, we will begin with an opening statement, a 1-minute opening statement from Senator Osten.
So thank you very much, Mr. Charnier. It's a pleasure to sit in front of you one more time. And I want to thank everybody for coming out on such a dreary day, and I'm hoping that the rain will eventually go away and we can get some clear days so we can all go outside and enjoy our lovely community. So I've been focusing over the last 6 years that I've been in the General Assembly on a laser-like way on jobs, jobs, jobs. That is clearly the one way that we can get ourselves out of the morass that the state of Connecticut has been in. So I'm just going to go over the last 2 years of my activities that have revolved around jobs. And I would say that in 2016, I worked on a regional economic development. In 2017, I supported an advanced manufacturing training bill. In 2017, I worked on job training for Eastern Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Osten. I'm sure. I'm sure that we'll get back to jobs during this debate. Mr. Lounsbury.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Mark Lounsbury. I'm born and raised in Eastern Connecticut. Career in Norwich Police Department for 23 years here in Norwich. Served as a detective my last 12. I'm still in service assisting seniors, volunteering with TVCCA. I also volunteer here in Norwich with the St. Vincent de Paul Place because I'm learning about what the people need in our state and what situation we are. You learn from the people that are at the bottom of that are in need. Article 1, Section 2 of the Connecticut State Constitution clearly states, in part, that the people are the authority and the government is instituted for their benefit. Now, my question and the reason I'm here is the government benefiting us? I don't think so. I feel that the government, as it stands right now, has been burdening us with excessive taxation, taking jobs away from us. They're leaving the state. People are leaving the state. Education is not getting any attention. They're cutting school education. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, again, now we move to the question part. If you could restrain from any further applause till we get down to the end, and we'll start with Senator Osten. Senator Osten, once again, the state is facing large projected deficits over the next 2 years, in excess of $4 billion, according to the Office of Fiscal Analysis. You serve as co-chair of the Appropriations Committee. Don't you share some piece of the responsibility for the fact that, once again, we're confronting these deficits?
Thank you very much. I think that for 70 years, where our biggest part of our deficit has been in the fault of both Republican and Democratic legislatures and governors for not dealing with our debt and pension. One of my main focuses as co-chair of appropriations is to make sure that we're paying our bills. And I have heard over and over again from my Republican colleagues that we don't need to pay the actuarial responsibilities for our pensions and health care. Without doing that, that continues with the problems that we have had. On our pension for state employees, we actually dealt with the issue of the pensions for state employees and have a plan that will clearly pay down the debt on state employees. Our other bigger problem is on teachers' retirement, and I think that we should look at putting one of our assets, like the lottery, off on our teachers' retirement, much akin to what has happened in New Jersey to deal with those issues.
Thank you. Mr. Lounsbury, you get 90 seconds.
As things stand, she mentions the teachers' retirement fund, of course, needs to be funded. It's also a big issue with the state employee pension. It's $100 billion or so that's unfunded, and it's untenable. And speaking with representatives in Hartford, I learned that the state has a $1 billion surplus, which is just sitting in the is unallocated funding in the general fund. Now, the Republicans that are there now intended to use that money, 33% of it, to fund the teachers' retirement fund. And another 33% they were going to allocate for Medicare. The other third was going to be at the discretion of both parties in general, or possibly just the Democrats. But that's the situation in the case with the state pension retirement situation. Like I said, it's untenable. And we are actually in danger of defaulting on our bonds here in the state. And once we do that, should we do that, then the federal government will walk in and they will take over our finances and they will dictate what the state workers get and what they don't get. And if you look at the situation right now with the state workers receiving 42% higher than average in this country for retirement benefits, there's going to be a big problem. And I would like that we handle it ourselves. Thank you.
You get another 30 seconds, Senator.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased that my colleague mentioned the rainy day fund that I do not think that we should spend down. Actually, at the end of this year, we should be closer to $2 billion. We need to make sure that we have resources available should we get into another recession. That was part of the problem that happened in our budget before. So I'm not for spending down the rainy day fund for absolutely no reason. I think that we need to, I have to stop.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, you can finish 3 or 4 words, both candidates. I won't be that strict, but I appreciate both of you carefully following the rules. Mr. Lounsbury, starting our next question, I think it's fair to say it's a follow-up to what we were just talking about. I got an email from a Republican voter who said, in his opinion, Connecticut needs a Wisconsin moment to rein in the power of government unions. I was wondering if you agree it's time the rules got tougher on organized labor and state government.
I spent a career in law enforcement, and I was in a union. And unions serve a purpose, and they do help their workers. And we went 6 years without a contract in Norwich, in the Norwich Police Department, because the town couldn't afford it. We've since had situations where we made concessions to the town because of financial hardship. What the union heads are doing, I do not believe that is what's going on with the rank and file, because they need to know that as things stand, with $100 billion in unfunded liabilities, it's untenable. There's no way it's going to be sustained. And as things stand with the current CBAC agreement, which was a gift, without that being renewed or looked at again and opened and people coming to the table, we're going to go, the state's bonds are going to default and the federal government's going to come in. What do you want? That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
And Senator Osten, you get 90 seconds to respond to what you heard.
Sure. Thank you very much. I don't think Connecticut needs a Wisconsin moment at all. I think that the current agreement, and I know for a fact that the current agreement gives billions of dollars in payback to the state of Connecticut as it currently stands. In addition to that, we have addressed many of the issues that the general public would like to see addressed. One is the infamous padding of pensions on overtime. That is not allowed to happen under the current CBAC agreement. The current CBAC agreement also changes for new employees into a hybrid 401k system. So some 12,000 employees now will be on a 401k system. In addition to that, the jobs have decreased. Over 10,000 jobs have been decreased for state employees over the last 8 years, bringing our workforce into a more manageable level. That has been done in conjunction with our organized labor, and that is bringing our costs into a more manageable way. There have been increases in co-pays, there have been increases in many ways. And then there is the talking points that people have had thinking that there is no way for the new executive to manage its labor force. That, again, is not true. Today, if a new, sorry, I gotta stop.
Mr. Lounsbury, you get 30 seconds to respond to what you heard.
Yes, CBAC needs to be revisited. It needs to be open. We need to renegotiate. That's simply the situation that we have. And when we talk about there are different union bodies that got the same deal, there are departments, there are parts of the state where the employees pay zero towards their retirement. They don't contribute anything. As far as at the federal level, at this country, most people don't contribute like 8%. That's like the average. To contribute 8%, thank you.
And if people come up, they can just be, we got cameras set up in front, so if you kind of stand back a little behind the cameras for any photos and such, and thank you. Senator Osten, kind of one more question before we move on to a different, perhaps different topic that's plenty to cover. So you've addressed that the concessions by the union have addressed, have rolled back the costs of labor. There was benefit concessions, the 401k hybrid, but what might the state do by the legacy costs of the pensions, where people retire with much better pensions, and the state is having difficulty fitting that, into the budget. So if you could, what might be done about those higher legacy costs?
So again, thank you very much. The higher legacy costs are there. We have dealt with some of the higher legacy costs on the health care by moving all retirees over to the Medicare Advantage program, which saved hundreds of millions of dollars in the last agreement that just happened. Our problem is with Tier 1, and our problem ended in 1984, but it is apparent, and even today, Oz Griebald, running for governor, said, why do we have to pay the actuarial response? If we don't pay that, that covers what we have for a deficit. That's exactly the same kind of thought process that has gotten us into this problem. We have 70 years of debt that we have to pay off. That is the same whether it's teachers' retirement or it's state employees. And I think the current plan will address some of that legacy cost that we have. And I think that that's the way we should go. Thank you. I finished the sentence.
Mr. Lounsbury.
Specifically, the issue is like with the Tier 1s. There's a lot of cost there and what we can do with it at the state level. I've had discussion. I've talked about re-amortization, and there's something that needs to be done. I'm not in Hartford. I don't have access to what can and can't be due. I have made that suggestion. I understand that tier ones, there's some type of bonding issue which would prevent that. That would mean taking that old tier one, taking that whole pile of money, getting one loan, separating it out from the rest, and paying off the principal and the interest on it. That's what that means. Don't know if they can do it or not, but I think that would be a possible means to handle that situation. Other than that, I got to get to Hartford and find out what else needs to be done. I haven't been up there.
Senator Osten, 30 seconds if you'd like it.
Sure. My colleague is misinformed. The bond that he's talking about is in teachers' retirement. And the other idea that he had is exactly what happened with the agreement that Governor Malloy made with the state employees. And that's exactly what we voted on. One of the few votes that was done on a partisan level and that achieved savings moving forward in the state employees where we address the return on investment. Thank you.
Mr. Lyons, would you like another 30 seconds just to respond to what you heard there?
I was
to be
just
fair?
wondering that my conceptual idea is what they've done, but still the situation stands. And when, if it's not the state, well, if it's the teachers, that's what I was talking about, re-amortizing the teachers' pension. And I understood that there is a bond, so that wasn't a mistake. There's a lot to do. If what I suggest has been done, then things should be better already. Thank you.
Thank you. And next question to Mr. Lounsbury. Do you consider phasing out the state income tax to be a worthy and realistic goal as proposed by Bob Stefanowski, the Republican candidate for governor?
Well, I've heard him talk about phasing it out. I think it's an honorable idea based on the fact that it was brought in prior to the income tax. The state was doing fine. We were a good state. We had a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs. And then in came it's like a bane. An income tax has been like a bane on the state of Connecticut. Since that income tax, okay, we balanced the books, but then we started spending the money we had. Then we started creating, or adding more taxes and increasing your income tax. So I think that's what he's going for. I know that for the first year, there's a lot of work to do before any tax reductions are made, period. Personally, I have other ideas, and I'd be happy to be able to get up in Hartford and see what kind of other solutions are available to be addressed there. And there's a lot of work to be done, but that's...
Senator Osten, 90 seconds of response.
No. Simply put, no. The governor candidate, Mr. Stefanowski, has no ideas at all that provide us with any idea how he plans on achieving that particular idea of getting rid of 50% of the state's revenue. That would be 50% of the state's revenue, which would put severely at jeopardy municipal aid, which is 25% of the state budget. Fully $5 billion is given out to municipalities to help out with education, town aid road, and a variety of other areas, and fully $4 billion of that $5 billion is on education aid from pre-K up to 12th. That does not include education aid in community colleges, state universities, UConn. I cannot see us jeopardizing the gains that we make with our municipal aid programs to satisfy an idea that does not have any merit, in my opinion.
Mr. Lounsbury, 30 seconds.
Again, we talk about how 50% of the budget is funded by our income tax. Why do we have all these other taxes then, I would say? And I'm pretty sure we can get rid of a ton of particular taxes. We're so reliant on income tax, as well as sales tax, gas tax. I could go on and on. Everybody knows everything's taxed. We all know that as things stand, you got to work all the way through April to pay your taxes. Thank you.
Senator Osten, you also serve as first Selectwoman of Sprague. Recently, there was a news report in our newspaper, The Day, that FBI agents were around town investigating. Can you shed some light on what that was about, and should it concern voters?
I'd love to, but I was never talked to by anybody from the FBI. I did have a cable show with my colleague next to me who said he knew a lot of people in the FBI and Secret Service. I'm assuming that he made a complaint there, but I do not believe that there were any issues, and I think it was done on a complaint from my colleague's campaign.
So the FBI never questioned you?
No. The last time I was ever had an FBI investigation was when I was 18, and I got a top secret clearance out of that one, so.
Mr. Lounsbury?
I don't know what to say. I have made no complaint during the course of this entire campaign to the FBI, nor do I have the power to dissuade or persuade the FBI to open an investigation. Yeah, I did talk about all the work I did with federal government, federal agencies, Secret Service, FBI, ICE. I work with ATF, a lot of people in the federal world. The situation is I do not wield the power to determine what the FBI does and does not do. And I have made no complaint to the FBI during the course of this campaign. I don't know how else to respond to that. I can also say that the information as far as the complaint came from the resident state trooper, and I did have a conversation with him. He did contact me, and I did ask him to, if he had it, to provide the report. And I told him I would put it on my Facebook page for all to see as to what the situation was with this FBI investigation. I have absolutely nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact, at one point in time, I was in town, and the first selectman filed a complaint against me with the state trooper for something which was inane. I had committed no crime. I was sitting in a parking lot. I was videotaping at the behest of other people in my town, the town work crew, 4 men, 2 trucks, 2 trailers, cleaning up somebody's yard. And that's all I have to say about that.
Senator Osten, do you have any direct evidence, or is it just speculation that Mr. Lounsbury had anything to do with the complaint?
Other than his continued saying that he has contacts with the FBI and Secret Service at the cable show that we were at, without being prompted whatsoever.
All right. Going to move to another question then. Mr. Lounsbury, how would you have voted on the bump stock ban, and did you agree with Senator Osten's decision to support the bill as written?
I have not read the bill, and as far as a bump stock's concerned, the Second Amendment bears the ultimate, you bear the ultimate responsibility to uphold the Second Amendment. And in the state of Connecticut, the law clearly states that law-abiding citizens, that's understood, can have the right to bear arms. Not only have the right to bear arms, they have the right to bear arms to protect themselves, their family, and the state. So the state pretty much calls on you as a law-abiding citizen as part of a militia. You're the reactionary group to come to save the state in an emergency. A bump stock is an erroneous accoutrement to a rifle. You can quickly fire any type of rifle you want without any type of toy. And the bump stock itself is, again, it's reaching and trying to take a little bit here and a little bit there based on. Thank you.
Senator Osten?
I supported the bump stock ban.
There was some concerns from Second Amendment advocates that unlike prior gun control legislation, you did not make an exception for people who already legally had purchased bump stocks. Could you address that?
Sure. I believe that in talking with a lot of my friends carry weapons, you know that I did not support the original bill that I felt impeded on the Second Amendment. I did not feel that this bill impeded on the Second Amendment at all.
Mr. Lounsbury?
Additionally, bump stock is not the weapon, and the Second Amendment is clear. It doesn't say you can arbitrarily choose which weapon, which name brand weapon you can ban. It's absurd. The situation with the firearms is the people that are using them. It's the use. There's mental health issues. If you look at the situation, it had nothing to do, it wasn't the gun. They could have had a car. They could have used a knife. But what they had was a gun, and it was mental health.
Excuse me, Mr. Chaunier, I still haven't heard an answer on that particular issue. Would he have supported the bill or not? Yes or no?
Do you care to respond?
Do I have to?
No, you don't. No, you know.
I wasn't there to legislate the bill per se, so therefore, that's my position.
All right, that's fine. I think it's Senator Osten. There was recently a Quinnipiac poll in which the responders, the voters, said the economy and job was their number one priority in this election. What role can the legislature play in boosting the state's economy? And you have a minute.
Thank you very much. And this is an area of which I take great pride in the work that I have done. I have worked with the Eastern Workforce Investment Board and the Eastern Advanced Manufacturing Alliance. I've met with the president of Electric Boat. I've forwarded legislation that has been passed and is working to provide job training, not only for young people who are out of high school, but most recently worked with the Eastern Workforce Investment Board to provide training at our high schools to fill some 30,000 jobs that will be in our area over the next little bit of time, over the next decade. Quite frankly, the bills that I have done have not only helped out Electric Boat, but have also helped out some of the 4,000 manufacturers that are here in Connecticut that are looking for workers to fill. I am laser focused on the issue of jobs in Eastern Connecticut, bringing the unemployment to 3.7%, less than the national average.
Thank you. Mr. Lounsbury, the issue of jobs and what the legislature's role could be.
You can give numbers that give some suggestion that things are good and there's a lot of jobs and therefore the job rate's down. But let's look at the actual numbers we're talking about here. You can say 3.9% unemployment. How many people have quit looking for work? How many people have left this state? How many businesses have left the state, taking the jobs with them? So we'll talk about real numbers of people, the people that live in this state. Who's got the great jobs? Where are they coming from? I'm hearing people leave. They don't have jobs. They're taking their families. The kids are coming back from college and are leaving the state to find jobs. As far as Electric Boat, that's the federal government, Department of Defense. The federal government has funded the Department of Defense, and they're building submarines and they're hiring. Years ago, I mean, EB hired, they employed 30,000+ people there. It could happen again, but that has nothing to do with the work at the state of Connecticut. The work at the state is you got to teach the kids. I mean, you got to learn how to read. You got to fund your K through 12, and that's not happening. And that's more important than training that EB's already paying for because they know how to train their people, how to use the tools of the trade. We need to look further. It's a simple situation. People are leaving. There aren't the jobs that I'm hearing about, and if they are, they're here because of the federal government. Other than that, I don't see what the state has done. Thank you.
Senator Osten, you get 30 seconds to respond to what you heard.
Thank you very much. There was some $83 million that was forwarded to Electric Boat to help them out not only with dredging, but to also provide resources for Electric Boat, for infrastructure. Infrastructure is also jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs all day long. The Wall Street Journal said that Connecticut was doing the right thing by putting in a small pittance against EB's $1.74 billion in infrastructure improvements in this area.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Lounsbury. I just wanted to double back to the Second Amendment issue. As we discussed earlier on the bump stock issue, but broadening it out, certainly the 19th district is home to a lot of smaller rural towns. and there is many gun owners in those areas. Do you think the state of Connecticut went too far or overreacted with the gun legislation that was passed in the wake of Sandy Hook? And would you, if you had the opportunity, try to mitigate some of the restrictions that were placed on gun owners as a result of that legislation?
Well, that's what separates us from the rest of the world. We're a constitutional republic. The rights of the individual outweigh the rights of the masses. Now, we had a particular situation. It was horrendous. It was horrible. I am so happy that I was not exposed to that. I've seen a lot during my career, and that must have just been unacceptable. But the answer is, what happened? Who was responsible? How do we address that one particular incident for what it is? That's what we do here in the United States as a constitutional republic and as a democracy. We find the problem, you address it. It was a mental health issue. A lot of things fell by the wayside. I understand the child was referred to, or the parent wanted the child to be interned, but it didn't happen. So we need to address each situation individually for what it stands on its own merit and not write laws that affect the rest of the people in this state. Thank you.
Senator Osten?
I voted against the legislation because I thought it was too far-reaching, and since that time frame, I've worked on some of the issues that I think needed to be addressed, in particular for mental health and mental health services, making sure that we have school-based health clinics that are able to address some of the issues with younger people. I think that that's vitally important, working to address the issues revolving around our behavioral health system that is not, in my opinion, funded in the level that it should be. I sat on a panel today and talked about the opioid problem that we have, but ended up veering off with the whole panel talking about the mental health system and where we need to be and what we need to address to deal with those issues. And I would plan on continuing to address the issues of the mental health system that needs far more resources to deal with the issues, not just with opioids, but those that are chronically mentally ill.
Mr. Lounsbury?
I'm in total agreement. As I said, the situation bore itself out. There's issues in this state with mental health, and a lot of it is due to substance abuse. I saw it on the street as a cop. I dealt with the people. There are a lot of people out there that need attention, individual attention. It needs to be addressed, and that's where the problem lies, and not in the gun. It's in how we're dealing with the people that need help in this state. And it needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Next question to Senator Osten. She gets 60 seconds. Do you support increasing the minimum wage to $15 per hour? If so, why? If not, why not?
I do support increasing the minimum wage, and so do employers. As a matter of fact, most recently, Amazon and McDonald's are working towards a $15 an hour minimum wage because they recognize that they need to pay their workers in a manner that allows them to stay working for them because they're training those workers. And so I think that it's important for us to get to a $15 an hour minimum wage. I've worked on that issue over the last 6 years, successfully passing 2 minimum wage increases. I think that we can do it over a planned amount of time to give businesses an opportunity to work on planning their workforce. In addition to that, this past session, we passed 3 bills on a bipartisan basis that supported an increase for workers in the healthcare industry to make sure that those workers were receiving the correct amount of money. Thank you.
Mr. Lounsbury, question of should we move to a $15 minimum wage here in Connecticut?
We shouldn't arbitrarily set minimum wage. This has been a topic of conversation in government for a long time, and the answer is out there, and it's been agreed upon what to do about minimum wage. What you do is you tie it to the consumer pricing index. As the consumer pricing index fluctuates and changes, the minimum wage goes with it. And that has been accepted on both sides of the aisle. Both Republican and Democrats have said, yeah, that does work, that will work. So why aren't they doing it? It's simple. We get rid of that issue of always having to determine what's going to be the next minimum wage. You don't arbitrarily set it. You let the Consumer Pricing Index address it for you. It's built in, and both sides know that it will work, and it does work. Why aren't they doing it? I don't know. Why is it so important to continue to have this situation where you have to have arguments over what's the minimum wage going to be, and who's going to decide what it is, and what effect does it have on the employers? We know, like McDonald's, well, they might set their minimum wages, but you go to the new ones, they have kiosks. There's no more people working there. You go and you push some buttons, you put your money in the machine, and you go up and you pick up your food. Where are those jobs for the kids that are in high school? That's what those jobs are for. McDonald's says it themselves on their commercials. They give them money to go to school, to go to college. It's for the young people, and those jobs are going away. Thank you.
Senator Osten?
Thank you very much. I'm glad that my colleague knows that the Consumer Price Index should be used to further the increase of the minimum wage, but we need to start with a base. And that's what bringing it up to $15 an hour would be to have a base of the minimum wage so that workers are able to afford things such as rent, heat. Many of the workers at a place like McDonald's are adults. They're not necessarily children. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lounsbury, you get the next question. You talked about in your opening statement about the amount of taxes and your frustration with the level of taxation as you see it here in the state of Connecticut. So in addressing these deficits, do you see increasing taxes as any part of the formula that might be necessary, or do you take that off the table? And if so, where might the cuts come that would be necessary to get us back in balance?
Well, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The situation is bore itself out. You cut taxes, you create an environment that attracts businesses and attracts people, attracts jobs. Now you have a larger base of taxable revenue sources. It works at the federal level. The taxing yourself into a hole and then creating more taxes it's unsustainable, and yet we keep doing it. We don't need to be making any more taxes. We need to be removing taxes. We need to be attracting businesses back to the state, bringing people, bringing workers, getting families back here, small businesses now getting involved. It's the entire fact that you tax everybody out of here, you don't realize how much is going, what's leaving. But by attracting businesses, you realize you're attracting more than just one company. Thank you.
Yes, Senator Osten, the point that our taxes are being self-defeating and that what we need is to cut taxes to promote revenue coming into the state.
That is not borne out to really bear any fruit in the discussion, but I think that we can look at some of the taxes that we have that I believe that, and we already have. For example, veterans who have pensions no longer pay on the income tax. That was a wise decision to make, and it increased the number of veterans that are staying in our state because they don't have to pay on the income tax, and I think that we should work on that level both for seniors in Social Security, federal employees who have a pension. That's some of the things that we should do. Now, I really have to take some response revolving around the number of jobs. We have 2,900 new jobs in Eastern Connecticut over the last year. That's just over the last year. Our jobs are coming back. This is a game-changing moment for us, and we need to understand that. And electric boat is going to be that game changer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lounsbury, you have another 30 seconds on this topic.
We had a discussion. The jobs aren't created by our government. It has nothing to do with what's happening in Hartford. That's the federal government. They created the jobs, and thank God they did, because without them, I think things would be even worse than they are as it stands. we talk about not cutting income tax, and it comes up. And myself personally, and again, in agreement with the senator. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next question, it was the League of Women Voters asked me to ask this, and I think it's a good question. We start with Senator Osten. There's two questions on the ballot, constitutional questions for voters this November. One would create a so-called lockbox in the intent to assure that money collected on the gas tax or any other tax geared for transportation is exclusively used for transportation. And there's also a proposed amendment that would require a public hearing and a 2/3 vote of the legislature to sell or transfer state land. So we have those two questions, and starting with Senator Osten, I'd like to hear whether our candidates support those constitutional measures.
I already voted for both of them to be on the ballot on more than one occasion, so I already support both of those. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Special Transportation Fund. The Special Transportation Fund has money in it from the gas tax. We moved over the gross receipts tax. I checked with the Office of Fiscal Analysis. There's never been money taken out of the Special Transportation Fund to go back into the general fund. That's just not happened. As a matter of fact, we moved almost $2 billion from the general fund of the gross receipts tax over into the Special Transportation Fund. I do think it gives people some comfort, and I plan on supporting that. I also support very much the 2/3 vote on on property and having to do such, because I think that that makes a whole lot of sense, so that each legislature is not going.
Thank you. Mr. Lounsbury, on the constitutional questions.
Lockbox is a great idea. It has been a great idea, but it doesn't work. And you can lock a box if there's no money in it. It's locked. But my understanding is that's not something that's functional, and it's not going to work. But yeah, try it. I like the idea. Make sure you put the money in there first before you lock the box, please. State land, state-owned lands. That's a little more complicated. There's a lot of state-owned land that falls within small municipalities, larger municipalities. They're not necessarily state. They could just be a piece of farmland. It could be a piece of commercial property. It could be anything. To lump everything up into being so important that, you know, I mean, you should have a discussion if you're going to sell a state park. But on the other hand, if you own a farm field in a town, and at the end of the year, it's customary that the state returns at the request of municipalities land for them to use again and to put back on the tax rolls and to get more revenue. To make that required 2/3 vote, is that necessary? Can we rewrite this so it's a little more, we're dealing with apples and oranges here, and we should look at it further. I mean, again, state parks, you don't want to give those away. That's an issue. We need to look at that. You don't want to give it to corporations. But a small municipality that wants to get some of the land that you own within its boundaries, let them have it. Thank you.
Senator Osten, is the constitutional amendment overly broad?
No, it's not. It's tailored. So I suggest my colleague read it, because it doesn't include commercial or industrial properties. It does not include buildings for example, Norwich State Hospital or Fairfield Hills, or eventually when we get to the point of closing down Southbury, will not include those types of areas. It's very much dedicated towards areas that are preserved and conserved. It could be farmland, could be open space, could be forest. Thank you.
Next question, Mr. Lounsbury gets in Connecticut as a way of raising revenues for our transportation needs, which I think there's bipartisan agreement that there are many transportation needs. I'd like to hear your position on whether tolls is the right way to pay for them or not.
I don't have all the numbers, but basically, as things stand right now, we do receive federal funding for not having tolls. And as far as tractor trailer trucks and commercial traffic on our states, They have tax stamps. They pay taxes to drive on our roads. So now we take those two factors, and I understand that should we put tolls at our borders, that the federal government is going to ask us, we will no longer receive whatever that funding is. I don't have access to that. I could look it up, yes. But also, we would lose that revenue and pay back the revenue that we had received previously. So now you look at the costs related to putting in the toll system, you're creating more jobs. What's the bottom line, and what's the number that we're looking at the bottom, and how does it affect your working class people? My understanding is it's going to cost, you going to and from work, there's a ton of tolls, 70, 80 tolls, I don't know, it was 1 million of them, there was a ton of them. That's going to cost the average person a lot of money.
Senator Osten on tolls.
Thank you very much. Again, I've already voted for tolls to come out of the Transportation Committee, so I think that you have to understand, and I'm surprised that my colleague has not done the research on this one, but there are only 10 states that don't have tolls. Alaska has tolls, Hawaii does not. There are only 2 states in the eastern seaboard that don't have tolls. As a matter of fact, I went down to Pennsylvania and went through tolled states all the way down to Pennsylvania when I had to go to a funeral for a family friend. I paid tolls all the way down. A third of the drivers, not a third of the commercial vehicles, a third of the drivers on the roads in Connecticut are not Connecticut residents. And I just point out very quickly so that I don't go above my time, but Massachusetts is bringing in $400 million a year on tolls. It allows them to pay for projects with cash. New York gets $2.5 billion just on roads, not on tolls that are on bridges, just on tolls that are on road, $2.5 billion. And the new tolls in New York bring in $20 million. We don't lose federal money. That's a boondoggle. That is just not true. And nobody, while there was a congestion study that was done, there is no one in the legislature that ever supported putting in 70 or 80 tolls. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lounsbury.
I've also understood that there'd be shutting down certain exits along 95 to funnel people through tolls. Again, I'm not up in Hartford. I don't see the numbers. I don't have access to what's going on there now. But should I get up there, I would definitely take a look. And the bottom line is to benefit the people of the state of Connecticut. If it's going to burden the people of the state of Connecticut, it's not going to happen because it's unconstitutional. And the point of me being in Hartford is, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, my bad. I have a flashing light or something.
Senator Osten, I think you get the next question. No, I might be off because you just finished, so it should be Mark. My mistake. Mark, would you support the legalization of marijuana for use by adults 21 and older if it was presented to the legislature?
I wouldn't support it. There's too much studying to do. It's unfortunate that it's been illegal at the federal level for so long, and that includes the entire family. But at least the federal government should have studied it like they study everything else. We don't know what marijuana is going to do in the long term. Right now we have Colorado. They're the lab rat. What's going on in Colorado needs to be studied, and then we can make a determination of if its benefits outweigh its negatives. It's an interesting compound, tetrahydrocannabinol. It's a depressant, it's a stimulant, and it's an hallucinogen. And there's not been enough study to just come out and say, well, let's make it legal so we can get some more money, because that's what it's going to mean. You're going to be taxing it. And people are, as adults, make choices. Libertarians say, leave me alone as long as I'm not hurting anybody. That's going on right now, whether in fact if it's legal or not legal. Simple possession, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Osten.
I believe the question was, would I support legalization of marijuana?
Yeah, for adults 21 and older.
For adults 21 and over. We already have legalization of marijuana for medical marijuana both for adults and children in the state of Connecticut. Many of our surrounding states are in the process of legalizing marijuana. I'd like to see us finish at least one study on the long-term effects of marijuana, but I certainly don't think it should be a criminal offense at all, because it's not something that provides for public safety by incarcerating people. We have decreased certain amounts of marijuana down to a less than, to mostly an infraction, but I think we should look at it.
So is that a yes or a no?
Would I support it? I would support a study first, and then
Okay.
depending on what the study says.
Okay. Mr. Lounsbury, you have 30 more seconds if you wanted to sum
Yeah,
up.
the question is, there's a lot that's not understood about marijuana and its effects. And as far as being adults are out there, if they choose to smoke it, they smoke it. And whether it's legal or not legal, yeah, small amounts are, you get a ticket, you don't go to jail. If you got 50 pounds, yeah, you're gonna have a problem. But we should just leave it alone. I mean, other than, we shouldn't get involved in it as a state, because it's simply a matter of collecting taxes and getting involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Osten, the Republican Congress and the Trump administration have rolled back some environmental protection rules that they felt were overreaching and were counterproductive to economic growth, but environmental critics say they're detrimental to the environment and exacerbating climate change. That's my introduction to the question. Should Connecticut be in a position of trying to take up the slack, so to speak, on environmental rules and climate change legislation in light of the policies we've seen in Washington?
I think I get your question. Are you asking if the policies that are being removed, should the state of Connecticut take those policies up individually?
Yes.
Yes, I think we should. I think that it's clear that there is a problem, and in the state of Connecticut, we have a long, rich history of working in a bipartisan basis to address the issues of climate change, whether it's working on the shorelines or working in our cities and towns that have to deal with issues of excessive storms that happen on a regular basis now. Unfortunately, Connecticut is on the receiving end of the decline of and what the Trump administration has done by rolling back some of the climate change legislation. I think that we need to move forward on that, and again, on a bipartisan basis. Connecticut has a rich history of doing so.
Mr. Lounsbury.
We stepped out of the Paris Accord. If you look at the world in general, the United States is way ahead of the curve as far as curtailing their CO2 emissions. Connecticut has nothing to do with, the whole thing for me in climate change is scientifically originally, it was determined that the data was fudged by the scientists in the UK. I remember I was in college at the time, and you don't fudge your numbers. As far as real, true evidence of man-made climate change, I have not seen any. And as far as I'm concerned, there isn't any. This is simply a matter in which to get more money from people. Because what's the government plan on doing? Taking your money, of course. Are they going to build a big machine that absorbs all the carbon dioxide and creates diamonds, or just carbon blocks with it? No, they're not. They're just going to take your money and do whatever they want with it. So the issue of climate change is, it needs some more, you need to show me some more proof, because you haven't shown me any proof as far as that we are responsible for what's going on with the environment in this planet. It's a big world. The sun's getting older every day. As it gets older, it gets hotter. And in 100 million years, folks, I hate to tell you this, nobody's going to be living here. This planet is not going to be some place that's hospitable. But until the point in time that thank you.
Yep, thank you. Senator Osten.
I don't think the question included anything on whether or not climate change was man-made or not. I don't think that that is the discussion at hand. The discussion at hand is, should we work on methodologies on a scientifically based way to deal with climate change. Climate change is happening. All you have to do is see how our storms have been lately, and you would see that there is climate change that is dealing with the issues of changes in our atmosphere. I think we need to deal with some of those issues, and there is so much more to this than just a couple of talking sound bites, and I think that we should pay attention to our scientists.
I'm going to give Mr. Lounsbury another 30 seconds just to clarify. I take it from your answer then you think it would not be a good use of Connecticut's resources to be putting energy, no pun intended, but putting effort into trying to limit climate change, carbon emissions.
It would be taxes, just like the Obamacare mandates that people pay money if they don't have insurance was removed at the federal level. The state of Connecticut enacted it. So if you don't have enough money, then you have to pay taxes to the state of Connecticut. Climate change is inevitable, and we have nothing to do with it, and it's just a moneymaker. And if my opponent was, or the senator was concerned enough, she wouldn't have cut down 200 acres to put up a solar farm.
All right. This probably be our last question. This is an email I got from the Connecticut Arts Alliance, and they're concerned, in their opinion, that with the state, again, facing deficits, that arts and cultural groups are also often the ones that see the cuts in spending. So they wanted me to ask our candidates, do they consider arts and culture a priority or a luxury when it comes to state expenditures? And you get first crack at that, Mr. Lounsbury.
Our arts is very important. It's amazing for young children, especially in the school system, how much arts and music does to help them develop mentally and to make improvements. We should make sure that, at least in our K through 8, that we keep that there for them. As far as the arts that exist that we go and visit, if we really love the Broadway plays, the musicals, etc., we should support them ourselves. Go out, pay money, support them in donations. And of course, yeah, the state could fill the hole. I mean, there are other non-for-profits that are losing money. There is a group that translates for the deaf news into written hand, and they've lost money. It is important, and I do agree, and I think there's other ways that we could do what we need to do to help out. Thank you.
Senator Osten.
Thank you very much. I think we're talking about the arts and culture at, not in the schools, but that help out in our communities. They're a fabric of what makes us a community and should be supported and has been supported throughout my entire tenure in the General Assembly. Not only do they provide us with that fabric of the community, they also provide us with jobs. And they also have that ancillary impact of bringing more money into each community where they are. I think that we need to pay attention to both, to the arts community. I believe that they presented you with a report which showed how much each one of those organizations brought in ancillary revenue for the communities that they're in. And this part of the state of Connecticut counts on the cultural pieces to bring people into Eastern Connecticut. We are the tourism capital of Eastern Connecticut in this section of the state.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lounsbury. You get the last word on our last question.
You don't have artists as adults if you don't have artists as children. And where the state gets involved and helps out the most is to ensure that children can get music and science. I mean, music and arts in K through 12. I mean, everybody knows how to finger paint. You go on from there. And as far as supporting the adults when they grow up, and it's obviously it's something we need to do. It's very important, a part of who we are as human beings. Art is something that defines us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to our closing statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute. This is the part where, if you so choose, you get to applaud after you hear what each of our candidates have to say. Again, 1 minute. And by a flip of the coin, Mr. Lounsbury goes first.
I'd just like to revisit Article 1, Section 2 of the Connecticut State Constitution, because I said in part, it says that the people are the authority and government is instituted for their benefit, not burden. It also goes on to say that the people have at all times an undeniable and indefeasible right to alter their form of government in such manner as they may think expedient. Does that necessarily mean that you can change the government? Possibly it does. In certain cases, we might have to, and revert to a type of government we had. You remember, we used to have a county that took away part of the power. It kind of balanced the power for the counties and brought some of the power back. In Eastern Connecticut particularly, we need to bring a little more control over what's going on in Hartford to ourselves to meet our particular needs. Do we need to do that? I'm asking you. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Osten, you have a minute?
Thank you very much. So I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming out today. And I love the state of Connecticut. I love where we live. I think it's simply put the best state in the United States. It is a perfect place to be. And I love the work that I get to do. And I love the work because of the different constituents that I get to help out. And I'm just going to name a few that I've been able to help out. Vincent Zersi, who needed to obtain his handicap parking permit, and DMV lost his paperwork. And we were able to get not only his permit, but we were able to get him repaid. I worked on insurance for Herb Kolodny for coverage for his prosthetic devices. I helped Adele Prisbell in Taffville get a new furnace through TVCCA's Energy Assistance Program after her paperwork had languished for a full 6 months, and we needed to get her ready for the winter season. I helped the small business of Thayer's Marina with a lease issue with DOT, making sure that we saved not one, but 3 small businesses in Norwich. I helped Holly